Here we go. Rashad Miller and Zach Hill bringing you round 5 of the
Craig
World
Wescoe.
Championship. And we are about to watch Craig Wescoe play against Willy Edel. Let's meet these players.
Willy Edel, Brazil, top pro, Latin America, playing Naya in Standard and playing Junt in Modern.
Craig Wescoe, United States, winner of Pro Tour Dragon's Maze, playing Boros in Standard and White-Black Tokens in Modern.
There you go. We have a matchup between a Pro Tour champion and a top pro point getter.
Pro point getter.
You know what? I'm not
That's what it is.
not a word scientist.
Science, man.
Don't make me use word science. Okay, here we go. We have Magic, and we have a Thalia on turn 2.
And that's, we see Edel without a lot of action in his zone. Thalia matches up well against that Scavenging Ooze with absolutely nothing in the graveyard. And, you know, and certainly Wesco not going to play another Thalia. That Silverblade Paladin he has going to curve very nicely into it.
So Silverblade Paladin pairs with Thalia, which already had first strike, but now has double strike. So it's going to deal 4 damage to Willy Edel, 1L. We apologize, Willie. We'll get that fixed in just a second.
Huh?
Oh, I thought it was Willie with 1L. It's Willie
I don't
with 2L.
think so. I think it's Willy like free.
Oh, okay. I got it.
But, I mean, you know, it can be whatever we say it is.
Yeah, we'll keep it the way it is right now. He's not a wily Edel. I'm sorry. All right, so attack with the Scavenging Ooze. What are we bluffing here? Tell me what's going on. This Scavenging Ooze is attacking the Silverblade Paladin.
Well, I think Edel is representing Gore Clan Rampager plus Activate Scavenging Ooze, which would take it over the top of the Silverblade Paladin. Also, just as a practical matter, it's kind of hard to block in this situation, so your Ooze isn't doing a whole lot otherwise. And yeah, we're actually going to see it just get through some damage right here.
Yep. I think all it takes is using, but he's actually going to do it both. So that's going to bring Craig Wescoe down to 13. There wasn't a block. This was just all damage.
Yeah, just straight up burn spell and keeping that Ooze while Edel has a mana open, you know, as a 3/3, capable of cracking back for a little bit more. This is going to be a big attack from Wesco, though. And I've got to say I appreciate his innovative method of demonstrating Soul Bond.
Is that a smiley face?
Maybe it is. Wesco all about keeping good cheer.
And there is a Sublime Archangel. I am not a mathematician. Thank you for telling me about that word.
No
but this is a lot of damage.
This is exactly 1 lot of damage.
This is 1 lot of. So Willy Edel takes 10. It looks like it goes down to 7, and he's left with a flyer that has double. Well, it doesn't have double strike, but it's threatening to be at least a 6/6. Any other creatures that Craig Wescoe play, you know, pre-combat, will just pump it up even more. So all he needs is 1 creature, and that's a 7/7.
Well, I think actually if it just attacks by itself, it's a 7/6, right? Because there's 3 creatures on the battlefield.
That is. Yeah, that is.
So Wesco very carefully attacking to make sure that Angel's lethal this turn, meaning that the Scavenging Ooze can't even chump block. And Edel 1 mana short of playing his Thundermaw Hellkite, which would be reduced to nothing more than a chump blocker, even if it was on the battlefield.
Well, I believe, to be fair, that Willy Edel did play a land every turn of this game.
he did in fact do so. It turns out that, what is that, Silverblade Paladin can kill you in a hurry.
Oh, so we're doing it the old-fashioned way, attack with all our creatures. We got a couple of double strikers. So that is a chump block with the Scavenging Ooze. This 3 mana is going to... Oh, we didn't even see the Stronghold in play just to give a creature +2/+0 and I believe first strike?
+2/+0 and haste, actually, which is really great to follow up of Supreme Verdict.
So that was a quick game for Craig Wescoe as he leads 1-0 over Willy Edel. Magic 2014 is available now on Magic Online. Crack some packs of N14, Booster Draft, and Sealed Deck queues right now. Starting August 2nd, you can enter 64-player Premier Drafts and Top 8 Sealed Deck events to earn invitations to the Magic 2014 Release Events Championship. to be played on August 18th. For more information, visit magiconline.com. So, if I were Willy Edel, and I just got smashed by creatures with terrific battling abilities, I don't know how I'd feel. Now, I did, still being Willy Edel, I did mulligan a 6, and I wasn't really happy with the 6 that I kept, but it was probably better than any 5 that I could draw. What do I do now that I know what this deck does? 'Cause I probably didn't test against it.
You probably didn't test against it. I mean, but that is the thing. At the end of the day, he's going to have little white creatures that you're going to want to kill. So I think you bring in your Mizium Mortars. I think you bring in your Pillar of Flame. And you might even bring in your Celestial Flare, which is going to be really good against cards like Sublime Archangel.
Actually, I'm going to interrupt you just quickly.
I can handle that.
Knowing that this is a 16-person tournament where one of the players is Craig Wescoe, do you make a metagame testing call and just start brewing some mono white decks just so that you're somewhat prepared?
I mean, the thing is, I think that, you're going to need to be prepared, if not against White Weenie, against Naya aggro, against Gruul aggro, and you beat most of those decks the same way by killing their little dudes. I mean, I think rolling Tremblor or something would probably be better against Wesco than it would be against some of the other decks. But on the other hand, you've got to have that against Hexproof too. So I think you get a lot of the hate out of the way kind of incidentally against a deck like Wesco's.
Okay, now continue with Sideboard.
All right, so I think you want, if you're Willie, you want maybe Oblivion Ring, definitely Unflinching Courage, definitely Mizium Mortars, definitely Pillar of Flame, maybe Celestial Flare. I think in terms of your cards that aren't that excellent, your Gore Clan Rampager, you're the control deck in this matchup. I don't know how good your Domi raids are. All of your creatures win in a fight, but it also dies pretty quickly. And I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I think maybe you don't even want 4 Thundermaw Hellkites, but not having played the matchup, yeah, it's really hard to say. Yeah, actually, Celestia Charm seems pretty awful.
I mean, being now appropriated as the control deck in this matchup, is a card advantage engine a thing? Is, keeping Thundermaw Hellkites in just because they're a 5/5 body a thing? I mean, do you just play Thundermaw Hellkite and pass and block their dudes?
Block some things?
Yeah.
I think, actually, the play I'd go for is actually sticking with Domri Raid and just upping my removal spells enough that I'd be fairly reliable to protect it. It's unfortunate that bringing in removal spells lower your creature count, but yeah, again, Thundermaw doesn't even play particularly good defense against Wesco. Honestly, it's pretty hard to put together a plan. I mean, I can see arguments for Scavenging Ooze because you're bringing in removal spells. On the other hand, I could see just, relying upon the size of your Hellkites and your mid-range creatures like Boros Reckoner, Loxodon Smiter, and Huntmaster to hold the fort. So a lot of different ways you can take this.
Okay, so now I'm Craig Wescoe, and I just, well, if I'm Craig Wescoe, I will freely say that I just smashed Willy Edel. I would never say it as Rashad Miller. We just saw a game of Magic, and we know a game of Magic can go either way at any point in time. But did I just get one of my God draws, or was it Willy Edel mulligan to 6? Is this my great matchup? What am I doing differently, if anything, game 2?
But, I mean, you definitely got a good draw, but you definitely didn't get your best possible draw. I mean, all your best possible draws involve Champion of the Parish. I think that Searing Spear is quite weak in this matchup. I think you're looking to take it out. Your 4 copies of Slayer Stronghold on the other end are pretty powerful, but I think you want to bring in Fiend Hunter. I think you want to bring in Burning Earth, and I think you want to bring in maybe your 4th Brave the Elements, although possibly not. I think Fiendslayer Paladin is only good in concert with other things. It stays alive, which is kind of nice, and it gains you life, which is kind of nice. Thalia, not super incredible right here. Knight of Glory, not incredible, but important for mana curve purposes. I think, though, that you want to maybe take out a Sublime Archangel or something, and probably your Knights of Glory for the Fiend Hunters, the Burning Earth, and the extra mountain to cast it.
Okay. Now, it looks like Willy Edel was mulliganing down to 6. So, same start, at least this time, I believe he'll be on a play whereas he was on the draw in the previous game. See if the 6 is going to be good enough.
They wanted to attack on lifelink to the Paladin. Maybe. So then you just complete pro red and black. That would have been good.
Craig Wescoe going through his wish list of how good his white cards should be.
Well, because they need to be. I'm looking at Wesco's list, and this is really an admirably constructed deck. I mean, a 4 Slayer Stronghold is, you know, you normally see maybe 2 of that card, but it's so huge in a deck with this much double strike and lifelink. And then, you know, very careful 2-drops chosen. Thalia and Knight of Glory, both, you know, really good at specific things. 8 protection from black creatures in the main deck, and not obviously against Jund. And after the board, being able to present 3 Banishing Priests and 3 Fiend Hunters against mid-range decks like Naya, you know, it's actually going to be kind of hard for Naya to stick a defender.
All right, so not a lot of action in the early games. We have an Avacyn's Pilgrim for Willy Edel, which got in for an attack that's going to bring Craig Wescoe down to 19. And there's a Boros Reckoner that's going to come down. Craig Wescoe draws his card, and his answer for Boros Reckoner could be one of these Banishing Priests that he has in his hand. It looks like he has at least 2, possibly 3, alongside the Fiend Slayer Paladin and a Sublime Archangel. A couple of land. He's about to play one of those, and there's one card that's just a little bit blurry. Not sure what it is. It's probably good. It's definitely white. We'll see what he is. It looks like Brave the Elements.
Yeah, he's definitely got to Brave the Elements. We see Edel kind of unloading his hand. He's got a couple lands, a Mizium Mortars. But I think what you do if you're Wesco is try to protect your Banisher Priest with Brave the Elements. But I guess he's thinking, no, you know, I've got so many of these that there's no sense in waiting around.
Yeah, and Banishing Priest, definitely a card that gets rid of Boros Reckoner without, you know, getting a 2-for-1 for the Reckoner's owner.
Yeah, you see Willie kind of dejectedly playing his 5th land. Now, what he's trying to do is not telegraph the fact that he can play a Mizium Mortars with Overload next turn. So what he kind of hopes to do is for Craig to just tap out to cast a bunch of creatures. You know, of course, not taking into account the fact that Brave the Elements is a real thing.
Yeah, and basically the exact opposite of that just happened as a second Banisher Priest gets rid of one of Willy Edel's mana sources, and there's still a white mana open for the Brave the Elements. So Willy Edel is not in a good position right now.
No, he's not. Still a mana away, obviously, from overloading Mizium Mortars due to Pilgrim hitting the Ben. Domri Raid, of course, when it's not able to protect itself, not exactly what you want to be doing to your own empty board.
Yeah, not only can it not protect itself, did not yield a creature off the top of the deck. Really, it was only Willy Edel's play. He does have Mizium Mortars in his hand that he can use to remove one creature, but it seems like he needs for that Mizium Mortars to resolve and destroy all of Craig Wescoe's creatures in order for him to stay in this game.
Yeah, it does. I mean, what he really needs to do is reach across the table and rip the Brave the Elements in half and hope no one notices on the video feed.
You have to take it out of the sleeve first.
Ooh, that's kind of hard.
That's the part that makes it hard to sneak it past us.
That's the one variable, yeah.
So in comes the attack with the 2 Banishing Priests, and they're both going at Domri. So Willy Edel's down to 0 non-land permanents once again, and there's a Sublime Archangel, which can make quick work of an opponent.
Yeah, and then Willie, of course, just saying, okay, this is my only out. You know, I've got to see it, but you can tell his tone of voice. He doesn't expect it to resolve.
Yeah, Craig Wescoe left 1 mana open for the last 2 to 3 turns, so that was definitely the protection that Brave the Elements did yield. So Willy Edel down to just a land in his hand, and Craig Wescoe has a Sublime Archangel and an army to worship it. As it flies into the red zone, there is a Fiend Slayer Paladin.
Played, of course, pre-combat to make Angel even bigger.
So that Angel is going to be able to attack for 8 damage. That's going to bring Willy Edel down to 8. So Willy Edel's going to have to come up with something good in order to survive this turn.
And I think he's got to, look for a bonfire and other mortars, and that's not what it is.
And that's it. Willy Edel falls to Craig Wescoe. Craig Wescoe wins this match very convincingly 2-0.
Yeah, I mean, Willie's draws were incredibly bad both games. Couldn't really get off the ground, and Wescoe's, by contrast, killed the opponent very quickly.
Very, very quickly.
No.
We're coming back here just quickly. Here we are, Rashad Miller, Zach Hill. Usually when we come to the booth, that means we're going to get to talk with someone just for a little bit.
Oh, yeah?
And we have crack reporter Marshall Sutcliffe.
Crack reporter?
Yes. Well,
Is he like-
he has a whip. yeah. He has a whip.
That makes sense.
He's going to be cracking his whip at Craig Wescoe. We're going to hear from the White Weenie Man himself what's going on with this deck. I guess we don't need to know how he made it because it's just a continual brew from
It's
set
a
to
process.
set.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like a thing that he just keeps in his consciousness at all times in case he finds the need for an aggressive white deck.
Yeah, and there were definitely a lot of cards that M14 played a part in that we saw. Two Banishing Priests, and we didn't really see the Fleeing Slayer Paladin really do anything other than, give an Exalted trigger to a Sublime Archangel. But there's definitely a lot of thought that came into play by, from just M14 being a new set and making this deck even more resilient.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the cards that renders the deck viable in the first place is the addition of Brave the Elements. I mean, Brave the Elements won an extended Pro Tour, and really was sort of the backbone of the deck. I mean, the deck, it protects you against removal spells, it gets you through any number of blockers, and it makes their mass removal usually just not even an out. It's not even like it can counter a Putrefy or something.
Yeah, so Marshall's ready. We're going to hear from him and Craig Wescoe.
Hey guys, down here in the feature match area, I have the winner of our latest video feature, Craig Wescoe, with me. Craig, what was the most important card of that match?
Well, Banishing Priest pretty much took out all his creatures, and then when he tried to overload Midzium Mortars, Brave the Elements kept all my creatures alive.
I heard Zach say that Willie needed to reach across the table, rip apart Brave the Elements, and hope that you didn't notice. Is that how good that card is?
Well, I had a second one, so he would have had to rip up both.
Yeah, I don't think that he had that in him. Maybe one, but not both of them. Have you noticed that those are the two cards that have been performing really well for you throughout the course of your two rounds?
I got destroyed even worse than I just dished out that match last round against Shahar. So there's only 3 people in the tournament not playing Jund and Blue-White-Red. So I guess I just played Willie, unless I play Kibler next round and playing one of those 2 decks.
So how did those matchups fare for you, Jund and Blue-White-Red?
Well, like I said, I got crushed pretty badly by Shahar playing Blue-White-Red last round. So, for those new zombie thing, the Lifebane zombie, that's kind of tough, but we'll see.
Same thing for Jund. It just, Lifebane zombie can just tear apart your hand.
Yeah, that's Jund, that's the new card that I'm most worried about, I think, but...
Yeah, I've seen a few of those over here tearing apart people's hands. All right, why don't we send it back to the booth now with Rashad and Zach.
There's a lot of Shahar Shenhar in those interview answers. So I think we should watch Shahar Shenhar play.
That's such a great idea.
Well, isn't that a great idea? I just thought of that right now. No pre-planning. No one told me. No one told me in my ear that we were already going there. I am audibling everybody to the Shahar Shenhar match, playing against Ben Stark. It's going to be a red, white, blue, blue, white, red mirror match. So we're getting the cameras into place. I believe this is still game 1. It might be game 2. It's still game 1, so we're going to get to see a lot of magic in this match against these awesome players. So here we go. We're watching the game. There is Shahar Shenhar, and also we have Ben Stark left to right. Looks like we have a Syncopate targeting some spell. Not sure what it is, but we have a Dissipate targeting that Syncopate. Something is on the stack. It must have resolved. Yep. It looks like it was an Aetherling. So right now the board state is, as you can see, as we now have it on screen, we got an Aetherling and a couple of Arga of Bolas facing off against Shahar Shenhar's Snapcaster Mage. And we got a load of land in play for both players. So this is how this matchup is going to go.
Yeah, and this really is, if you're playing Stark, one of the key advantages of running this particular build is just how nearly unbeatable Aetherling is. Just absolutely nothing you can do about it. Now, the one thing that you can do that doesn't deal with it, but deals with the game state in which it contains it, is cast a giant Sphinx's Revelation right now, which you can do with all of the lands that Shenhar has out. So Aetherling may not end the game in as short of order as we frequently see it.
Yeah. Now, I mean, we were in the booth together at the last show, which was on Pro Tour Dragon's Maze, which was block constructed, and we saw a lot of Aetherling on Aetherling battles. And once the Aetherling hit the battlefield, it was hard to, it never died. And it was basically inevitability. And things like Sphinx's Revelations were all that those players could do to try to get themselves more time and find a way to win the game faster than their opponents. So as Shahar Shenhar goes up to 19 from a Sphinx's Revelations, Ben Stark sitting at 7. This could go either way, right?
Yeah, it could. I mean, it's an interesting Sphinx's Revelation because, like, you kind of need the life. So he's keeping a lot of mana open, but that is a lot of life that he didn't gain that are just turns of Aetherling dealing damage. Aetherling deals its damage in, 8-point increments?
Right.
So being at 19 means that you can still only take, 2 hits.
Well, it would be 3 hits, and I don't know, did he have enough mana to... It would take him a lot more mana to get him to another Aetherling attack, so maybe this was just a judgment call to leave mana open for the Syncopates in his hand or the burn spells that he has.
No, I think you're exactly right. I mean, you want to leave up War Leader's Helix mana, you want to leave up mana to keep your spells live, and... you're creating stuff with Moorland Haunt. I mean, Stark's only at 7, so Moorland Haunt tokens attacking is actually very relevant. I mean, that in concert with War Leader's Helix and then a burn spell is the entire game right there.
Right. So we have an untap. Let's see what the top of the deck yields. Another Moorland Haunt, which is going to speed up that clock you were just talking about.
With the Spirit token?
Well, yeah, because the Spirit token plus burn plus War Leader's Helix could be the 7 damage that he needs. The question is, will all those spells resolve, and does he think they'll resolve?
Right. Now, there is a Spirit token in play. We're just trying to get a proper token so that we can represent it. There it is. It's tapped. It already attacked. It brought Ben Stark down to 6. And there is a Syncopate.
Yeah, he's showing him the turn burn and the War Leader's Helix and the Syncopate to protect it, so that means that he is able to race through the Aetherling and take this game.
And that's what happens. The Aetherling puts down the clock, and all you have to do is do it a little bit faster as Shahar Shenhar wins game 1 over Ben Stark. Ultra Pro is the leading manufacturer of trading card game sleeves and deck boxes. If you're looking for official Magic 2014 portfolios, card storage boxes, deck boxes, sleeves, and playmats, Ultra Pro has you covered. For more information, visit wizards.com/magic merchandise. So we have a mirror match.
We do. It's a few subtle differences. Shahar, way more Snapcaster mages than Ben has. Ben has Aetherling, which is huge in this matchup. Shahar, I think, has one more counterspell, which is reasonably relevant. Also has Is It Charm, which is really good in a matchup where you're fighting over Sphinx's Revelation. Ben, however, has Jace, Architect of Thought, which is incredibly important because in a control matchup like this, you're really just trying to kind of gain a bunch of card advantage.
All right, now here's the card that was the card of the tournament at the last tournament, which was Pro Tour Dragon's Maze, and it's here again, Aetherling. And we almost have this memorized because we were just talking about Aetherling so many times. It's rare, it's resilient, it's flexible. It just wins games. And I think you had a little bit to do with design of this card.
Yeah, well, we had our rare team had a meeting, and we were sitting there saying, we made a bunch of Morphling variants, and, Thorling kind of cool, Torchling kind of cool, but, isn't it kind of a bummer that Morphling used to be one of the best creatures in Magic, and now is essentially a blank? I mean, it's bad. So we tried to make a Morphling that we thought would actually be good and would actually feel like Morphling used to feel, a creature that played defense, played offense, and could kill you really fast. And again, we wanted it to be a thing that you could go to if you're playing a control deck to end the game against other control decks while being playable in other matchups. So this is kind of the set of abilities that we came up with and the stats that we came up with to make it as good as it needed to be.
Yeah, and it is definitely doing an effective job of ending games for control decks, because I'm going to be honest, I got a little bit tired of watching control matchups, just kind of sitting there waiting to see who could grind each other out the most with Moreland Haunt tokens and like playing things like Rune Chanter's Pike to try to deal big chunks of damage, when now we just have a card that just does it. It hits the battlefield. You can't really answer it.
Right.
So you either have to get really, really creative, or the game is just going to be done.
Right. I mean, and there is a cost to it, which is that you have to, commit like half your mana to killing him quickly with it.
No problem.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, yeah, and that's what, as we saw at the last Pro Tour, what a lot of people decided to do, exactly that.
So now you were noting that there are some differences in both of these players' decks. Now, do these differences put either of these decks in a better control position, or maybe one deck can actually be the beatdown in this matchup? Is there any wiggle room there where someone can just kind of switch gears and say, I'm going to be the aggressor. I'm just going to try to attack you and make you deal with my threats?
Right. There are a few subtle differences. I mean, definitely with Shahar. He has one more Restoration Angel that matters. One more Restoration Angel. Ben Stark has Assemble the Legion, though, which is really, really good. They both have Counterflux. They both have Negate. Shahar doesn't have Counterflux, but he has 3 copies of Negate. So Stark means he can say no absolutely to Shahar's Sphinx's Revelations. He can also protect absolutely his Assemble the Legion and Aetherling. So, the one edge that I would actually give to Shahar more than anything else is really his 4 copies of Think Twice, as counterintuitive as it sounds. The thing is, 4 Think Twice means that you're not only ahead on raw cards, you're just most likely to hit your land drops, and hitting land drops is the only thing that you want to do in a control mirror. So I think that Ben is more well-positioned if things go his way. I think Shahar is slightly more well-positioned to get into that game state in a first place. So subtle distinctions, but distinctions that could wind up deciding this match.
All right, so players just presented their decks. They're doing the shuffle. At least we don't have table shuffling on the presented decks.
We don't have table shuffling. We don't have Kibler hand shuffling.
Well, Kibler hand shuffling doesn't impede on any timing issues that we could have. It's very entertaining. I've even saw a video set to music.
Wow.
It was very good. It was trendy.
Do you remember the music?
I refuse to acknowledge the answer to that question.
You refuse to accept my bait?
Yeah. Not accepted. Denied. All right, so here we go. We're looking at their 4 cards.
Yep.
7 cards, actually. 3 bonus cards.
So it looks like we actually see Shahar bringing in Thundermaw Hellkite to try and kind of give himself a little bit more of a clock this time.
All right, so 2 land, and we have looks like a Think Twice for Ben Stark.
Ben drawing one of his 2 Thinks Twice.
And an Argarabolus for Shahar Shenhar. Let's see if we can get anything off of it. And it's a Think Twice for Shahar Shenhar. So we will have spells being cast the early parts of this game.
There's so much thinking going on.
3rd mana for Ben Stark. In a pass, he's probably going to flashback that Think Twice at the end of the turn. Attack from Argarabolus is going to bring Ben Stark down to 19. Shahar's at 18 from playing his Hollow Fountain untapped last turn. So he's probably going to play a 3rd land. He only has a 2nd Hollow Fountain, it looks like.
Yeah, we see, Hallowed Fountain or a Glacial Fortress untapped.
Yep, he has a Glacial Fortress also. So Think Twice was flashback for Ben. Draws his card, has a Clifftop Retreat that he just picked up. He actually has a few land that he has, so he's probably not going to miss a land drop this game. 4th land for Ben Stark, past the turn. Think Twice from Shahar Shenhar. Draw for the turn. He has a Syncopate. He has a Is It Charm.
So
War Leader's Chant. He has a bunch of. He's got a lot of action if
18.
Ben Stark decides to do something or put a creature into play.
yeah, and it's kind of one of the tricky things about this matchup is you don't really want to be the first player to do something with all these counter spells being thrown around.
All right, so another land for Ben Stark. Back to Shahar Shenhar, who, despite having the only creature in play up until now, is losing the life lead. And Dissipate takes care of that Restoration Angel, which was threatening to gain Shahar Shenhar a clock and another card. So in comes Augur Bolus again. Ben Stark 17, Shahar Shenhar 16. And we're probably going to have a land and pass from Shahar.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that like Shahar really not. It doesn't have a lot of incentive to do anything just yet. He's got a lot of mana he's keeping open, gaining subtle incremental advantage with that Augur of Bolas. Kind of just, is waiting to tell Ben to take some action here.
So here we go. The first attempt at a relevant spell. Jace, Architect of Thought. So this is that flinching first you were mentioning.
Right, and so, he obviously been waiting to cast Jace until he can leave up to, largely because of Is It Charm, and drawing 2 counter spells with that Jace. Can't really be too upset about that if you're Ben.
Not really. You really can't, as Is It Charm. But both of those counter spells were losing value as the game gets out longer. And there is a Thundermaw Hellkite, which is going to put some real pressure on Ben Stark. Ben Stark's going to go down to 11. He's going to need to find an answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a Detention Sphere in his hand. He's got an Azorius Charm. He has a Snapcaster. All he really wants to be doing right now is making land drops.
Right.
And he doesn't have any more land in hand, but he has more land on the table than Shahar does.
All right, so a 6 land for Shahar Shenhar. He plays untapped and leaves 6 mana open. So he is showing that he has a spell he wants to have available, all of his mana. One of them is a War Leader's Helix, and the second one was a counterspell of some sort.
Now, wow, that is a huge Jace for Stark, and again, we're going to see Ben, I think, need to use. Oh no,
he just
we don't
uses
need
a
to
Dissipate.
counterspell. Okay, so Ben wanting to leave up that Dispel to protect against the Sphinx's Revelation from Shahar's side of the board.
All right, so Shah draws 7th land, attacks again, brings Ben down to 9. Going to pass the turn. He picked up a Snapcaster Mage. He has a couple of Snapcaster Mages, which threatens to give him some card advantage and just be 2 powered beaters because Ben Stark is down to 9 life.
Yeah, I mean, actually, like Ben, not at an incredibly high life total right here. We see a War Leader's Helix and Snapcaster Mage threatening to end this game in a hurry. A pretty fast game relative to what we're used to seeing in this kind of matchup.
Now this War Leader's Helix is on the stack right now. So Ben Stark has the chance to let it not deal 4 damage to him, which will bring him down to 5, and that's pretty low.
Yeah, I mean, you're not excited to be using Dispel on War Leader's Helix in this matchup, generally speaking, but I think with your life total this low, and with Stark having 3 mana up to just, cast a value Snapcaster if he wants to, I think you kind of have to pull the trigger on Dispel right here. You still have Snapcaster Dispel up if you want to do that.
So here's 2 mana, so there's Snapcaster. So it looks like Ben wants to use the Dissipate to get rid of the War Leader's Chant.
And that makes sense. It's way easier to hold open Dispel mana than it is to hold up Snapcaster Dissipate. So you might as well use Snapcaster Dissipate while you can. You still have your own Dispel up to protect it if that's what needs to happen.
Right, so Shahar Shenhar tried to syncopate the Dissipate, but the Dispel that Ben Stark had in his hand allows the War Leader's Helix to not resolve. Attack again with the Augur Bolus. That's going to bring Ben Stark down to 8. And Shahar Shenhar picked up a Restoration Angel. Again, more threats that can bring Ben Stark's life total down low. And now Shahar has to decide if he wants to ambush this Snapcaster Mage, and he does.
Yeah, and I think you're casting that Angel even if he didn't attack. So the fact that you get a free Snapcaster Mage out of the deal is kind of tremendous.
Not only a free
Shahar.
Snapcaster Mage, but he gets a reactivation of that Augur Bolus, which picks up a Dissipate. And conveniently, there's 3 mana open for Shahar Shenhar, so more protection for the beats that he has right now.
I mean, if you're planning on revelationing here, you might want to revelation in response to that angel just because of things like drawing the dissipate, but
Right.
he had the dispel up to protect it in any case, so that revelation is going to resolve.
Right, so that is a Revelations for 4. That's going to bring Ben Stark up to 12. Most importantly, gives him 4 more cards to work with. But he's looking at a clock of 4 damage a turn, so that's a 3-turn clock.
Right, and with 2 Snapcaster Mages on Shenhar's side of the board, as well as a loaded graveyard, the pressure is really on Stark to do something. Now, if he has Supreme Verdict still in his deck, that is a card that no amount of counter magic is going to do anything about. The challenge is drawing it and having it left in your deck in the first place. You know, it only has 2 copies, and traditionally Wrath effects not that good in a sort of control mid-range mirror. That said, the uncounterability is pretty important in a matchup like this.
Right, so now we have another attack for 4 from Shahar Shenhar, and Ben Stark uses Think Twice to try to find an answer. Doesn't find it, takes 4, it goes down to 4. He doesn't have a lot going on in his hand. He has a Ratchet Bomb and an Aetherling. Not really anything that's going to get him out of this trouble. He picked up a second Ratchet Bomb. He's looking at the Aetherling, and he just drew and assembled Allegiance. Still nothing to interact with that 3/4 flyer, which is threatening in conjunction with the Augur Bolus to end this game. Ben Stark can put a creature into play that will block the Augur Bolus, which will give him another turn, barring no other action from Shahar Shenhar. And it looks like he's going to drop the Aetherling to play defense and probably mount an offense a little bit later.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, Shahar just casts the Snapcaster Mage as a 2/1.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's all it took. And Shahar Shenhar wins 2-0 over Ben Stark.
Yeah, that was a really weird match. I mean, Shahar putting a lot of pressure comparatively on Stark with just a 1-3 attacking every turn.
All right, back in the booth, Rashad Miller, Zach Hill. In a moment, we're going to talk with the winner of that match, Shahar Shenhar. But for now, we're going to talk about how awesome it is when Shahar Shenhar gets to beat a beatdown in his 4 Think Twice deck, where, you know, I'm a big fan of Who's the Beatdown.
Right.
Not the actual writing, but just the
idea.
theory, just the idea. Not that it was a badly written article. It's just that
We love you, Mike.
We love you, Mike. It's just that, you know, I don't read.
Oh, well, that's
I'm not,
kind
but
of
you
wrong.
know, but
Whole illiteracy thing.
I'm not a word scientist. But I'm a fan that in these mirror matches, someone needs to be the beatdown or be the aggressor. And usually it's either by planning or like pre-planning, like this is my strategy,
Right.
or by, oh, I drew the most creatures, so now I'm going to be the one attacking, and you're going to have to be forced to deal with my threats.
Well, yeah, and I really think that's kind of what happened in that match. It was a combination of Stark taking a decent amount of damage from his own lands and just kind of the cards that happened to be drawn. I mean, if Stark had had his own Augur of Bolus, then none of that would have taken place. So I think a lot of the ways that in what's essentially a mirror matchup that we can see all these kind of divergent play patterns is simply the variance of the cards that you draw. I mean, in a 60-card deck, you only get a 7-card opening hand, and that can mean that decks containing the exact same cards play out very, very differently.
Yeah, and we saw how Snapcaster Mage even added on to that. And usually when you think of a Snapcaster Mage, it's the card that flashes back the best card in your graveyard.
Right.
But it also has a 2 power.
Yeah, it's also a 2/1
And-
and play instant speed.
And you know, sometimes the best card or even the second best card in your graveyard just happens to deal damage to your opponent's face. So when you're the beatdown, it doesn't always mean, you know, efficient creatures, power, toughness versus their casting costs. It's just dealing damage to your opponent.
Well, yeah, and no one's going to come give you a high five for killing your opponent on turn 4 as opposed to turn 9 or 10. Right? I mean, being the beatdown simply means who has the initiative.
Right.
And in that game, Shahar pretty clearly had the initiative.
Yes, exactly. Now, there were some other results. There's at least one more result that I can give you from the matches that happened in the feature match area while we were watching Shahar Shenhar. Tom Martell, 2-0 over Dmitry Budakov. So that's all I really have from that. So
anticlimactic.
I know. I build you up, Buttercup, baby, just to let you down. All right, let's send it down to the feature match area so that we can hear from Shahar Shenhar sitting with Marshall Sutcliffe.
Hey guys, Marshall Sutcliffe here in the feature match area. I've got Shahar Shenhar with me. Shahar, you're 4-1 currently. How's it been so far?
It's been a really fun tournament. Playing against great players is awesome. You have really interactive games. I played, let's see, Webb round 1, and then I forgot, but I played Shuhei, and I played Ben, Wesco, Willy Edel, and is that 6? Is that 5?
That's 5. We get that there's no slouches here in the World Championship. Everybody's a great player. Now, can you walk us through a little bit of how this last match went? It's a mirror match versus Ben Stark. Now, Hall of Famer Ben Stark.
Yeah. Congratulations to him, by the way, and Luis and Huey, of course. Well, this matchup is game 1 for me is not very good. He has 2 Etherlings, and those are very, very hard to deal with for me. I don't have counterfluxes. I have Dissipate, so I can't just counterflux it and not have a problem. But I managed to squeak it out with multiple revelations, and I grinded him out. He played Etherling very, very late, and it was a little too late. Game 2 and 3, on the other hand, I have 3 dragons, and those are just very, very good. He just can't deal with them, and that's basically what happened. He dealt with it with the Tension Sphere, but he took 5 damage, and I burned him out.
Yeah, I saw that you started to play War Leaders. Helix is targeting him, and you guys ended up having a counter fight over one of them. He seemed pretty distressed about that.
Yeah, well, he was at 9 at the time, so if I Helix him in a turn, he goes to 5, and which basically means he can't really tap out for much, because he's going to take 1, so he's going to go to 4, and he can't really tap out for anything the entire game if he takes it. So, he had to leave himself open, like Revelation in a turn and stuff, to come back in the game.
All right. So that's Shahar Shenhar. He's 4-1 here at the World Championship. Let's send it back to the booth with Rashad and Zach.
Back to us, Rashad, Zach. I got one more result that I need to tell everyone
Tell me about it.
One more. Brian Kibler, 2-0 over David Ochoa.
Wow.
That's all I got.
Yeah, no, Kibler doing really good this turn. I really think Kibler kind of wants this. And I know that's like kind of one of those things that like people say in competitions that you're like, okay, well, does that really matter? But the answer is I think it does. I mean, Magic is a game that requires intense focus, and I'm pretty excited to see Kibler doing well today.
All right, that's enough of us. We're going to send it back to the news desk with Richard Hagan and whoever his lovely guest is.
Hello everyone. Well, my lovely guest turns out to be the scorecard and the scoreboard. There are still 2 matches outstanding, but if we take a look at the scoreboard, we can tell you how things are going here in round 5. We're now starting to see the field separate, get a sense of the shape of things. Remember, the 8 names on the left of your score are the players who was 3-0, Stark and Duke, and then the 2 and 1s coming out of draft. Edel, Kibler, Wesco, Shenhar, Froelich, and Sifka. The right, the players trying to make a run to even things up or even get ahead of the curve. So this round we have already Wesco 2-0 over Edel, putting Wesco to 3-2. We have Kibler over Ochoa. Kibler now 4-1. Ochoa 2-3, back down the pile. Shahar Shenhar 4-1 over Ben Stark. Stark began at 3-0. He is now 3-2. Dmitry Budakov 1-4. Tom Martell 2-3. So Budakov right on the limit with that 4th loss. Reed Duke, what a developing story. That is 5-0, leading because he has beaten Stanislav Sifka, and then Li Shi-chan defeated Eric Froelich by 2-1. They are both now at 2-3. The outstanding matches, Utter Leighton against Watanabe and Shuhei Nakamura against Martin User. We'll bring you those in a little bit, but
let me ask you one quick question, Rich, before you do that. Players at home looking at the standings and the coverage, see something called cumulative standings. What does that mean?
Let's do the really simple version. Let's suppose you go 5-0 in a 7-round tournament, and then you lose your last couple of rounds. Okay?
So 5-0-0-2.
Yeah. Or you might also get to 5-2 by going lose. So I'm now at 0-2, and then I go win.
Okay.
Well, basically, that means that if you take a million, billion, trillion tournaments, all those people who began 0-2 and then won 5 generally had easier matches and easier opponents and easier decks to play against than the people who went win, and then right at the pinnacle started getting beaten by the best of the best. So the idea of this cumulative tiebreak is that basically, if you win early, that's really good for you, and losing late is not penalized in the way that losing early is. So the early defeats are bad, and early wins are really good. That's the really simple way to put it. So you want to keep winning early, because it is no shame to lose a match at 6-0, to go down to 6-1. But when you're at 0-1 and then you go 0-2, well, that's more of a big deal, that loss.
And not necessarily saying that it's worse, but it's
no.
Losing at 6-0 just means you faced a tougher matchup.
Absolutely, yeah. So just basically what that means is that Reed Duke, who is at 5-0, if he ever bothers to get around to losing, well, then he's still in prime position in terms of tie breaks. Here's what we're going to do. We're in the middle round of Standard. Yesterday we recorded a bunch of Standard deck techs for you, and one of them is with a player currently at 4-1 and doing very nicely, thank you. And that is Brian Kibler. So we're going to hand you across to yesterday, as it turns out, and see what he had brewing for Standard. Here's Brian Kibler.
Hi, welcome to the Tournament Center. I'm Zach Hill, and I'm here with Brian Kibler, the Dragon Master, and we are going to take a look at his red-green aggressive deck we're just calling Gruul Aggro. Now, if we can take a look at some of the cards up there, we're going to start, I guess, with some of the big beasties. Now, we've called this an aggressive deck, but we've got a lot of 4 and 5 drops here. 4 copies of Gorklan Rampager, 4 copies of Hellrider, 4 copies of the Dragon, Thundermaw
exactly.
Hellkite.
Don't leave home without it.
Now, that's a lot of fatties. Why'd you decide to play these in this deck?
Well, one of the things about Standard right now is that there's a lot of cards, especially in decks like Jund and Blue White Red, which I expect to be the most popular decks in the field, that can really punish just small creatures. There's Huntmaster of the Fells, Olivia, Thragtusk. It's very difficult to fight through these with just small creatures, so you want to be able to go big.
And in fact, you're not actually playing your own Huntmasters.
Right.
Why is Hellrider a better choice in that slot?
You want to do damage. If you're playing against a deck like Jund, you don't really have time to play a Huntmaster and try and beat them with that. Their deck is full of stuff like their own Huntmasters and Thragtusks and Bonfires that playing a 4-drop that doesn't attack them the turn it comes into play, and doesn't really, do all that much to forward your position toward actually killing them. It's just not worth it. You'd much rather be more aggressive with something like Hellrider.
Totally. Speaking of being aggressive, let's actually take a look at some of the cards that support all of these fatties in this deck. Now, you're not just throwing a bunch of 4 and 5 mana creatures in there. You've kind of got to do something before that.
Yes.
Now, I see Arbor Elf, Elvish Mystic, 4 copies of Arbor Elf, only 2 of Mystic. How did we get to that combination?
I actually started with 4 of each. Elvish Mystic was one of the cards in M14 that was most exciting to me. I have long loved the Llanowar Elf, and having only Arbor Elf as an accelerator in a green-red deck makes it really difficult to actually get to your big creatures frequently. And Elvish Mystic provides you with an acceleration, especially to this fellow, Domri.
Yeah.
And being able to play a Domri on turn 2 against a lot of controlling or sort of mid-range control type decks like Jund is just incredibly powerful.
And one of the things you were saying to me is a sacrifice you have to make to play this deck, unlike something like Naya, is you don't have Boros Reckoner, you don't have Loxodon Smiter. Why is Domri worth it? What makes this guy so good?
Domri is just incredibly powerful. The +1 ability on Domri in a deck that has as many creatures as this one basically draws you half a card each turn. I have, I think, 29 creatures in the deck, so every time you +1 Domri, you have about a 50% chance to draw a card.
Totally.
And the fight ability on Domri is super, super powerful because a lot of times a deck like this will really want ways that it can break through a stalled board situation. Say your opponent does play a Huntmaster. You want to be able to kill that Huntmaster, but you don't want your deck to be clogged up with a bunch of removal spells. So Domri gives you the ability to just fight that Huntmaster and get it off the board and keep attacking.
Right, and if maybe if you don't want to play a removal spell now, but you want to a couple turns from now, he just sits on the board and threatens.
The ultimate on Domri is basically you win the game. I've literally never lost a game where I've ultimated Domri, including games where I never again drew a creature. The double strike, trample, hexproof haste, that's a huge, huge threat, particularly against decks like blue, white, red that are ill positioned to actually be able to deal damage to kill Domri. So if you play an early Domri against them, they have to play so strangely to be able to just keep it from ultimating that you're frequently able to just kill them with your creatures.
Right, they're having to like throw burn at that instead of your creatures and things of that nature.
When their turn 4 has to be Warleader's Helix your Domri, they're probably in trouble.
That makes sense. Okay, so one thing that we're seeing though, we have Arbor Elf and Elvish Mystic, but we actually have a lot of 2-drops in this deck. If we can take a look at those. We've got, okay, well, these are not those guys. Let's try again. Flip a coin, and where does it get us? Any 2-drops? Okay.
No, we have Visiomortars.
We have Visiomortars. Oh, well, that's technically a 2-drop.
It does cost 2.
Pretty good. So what we're not seeing right here is, of course, Strangleroot Geist, Flinhoof Boar, and the Big Daddy from M14, Scavenging Ooze, was a legacy staple before he showed up in Standard. Now, normally when people are playing, a lot of Llanowar Elf type cards, they're trying to power into 3-drops. Your deck has 11 2-mana creatures. Why are these guys so good?
Well, you really want to be able to, like I said, get in the board and start attacking your opponent quickly. And Scavenging Ooze is a hugely powerful threat in the mid game. So being able to have a creature that you're able to sink mana into from stuff like Arbor Elf or Elvish Mystic later on, you can still make use of that mana.
Totally.
And even Flinthoof Boar is kind of a 3-drop. Because if you play an Arbor Elf or Elvish Mystic on the first turn, here we go.
Yes.
My fellas.
Yeah, you hang out with the pigs.
Exactly, exactly. You bore them to death. Get it? No,
I see what you did. I'm not Luis Bryan. You can't get away with that. Okay.
So you play your elf or elf or elf, and you can get in with Flinthoof Boar immediately. And plus the elves actually provide bodies for Hellrider triggers later in the game. So you actually have a lot of uses out of those mana creatures, even though you don't really have much at the 3 slot in terms of actual creatures.
Right.
For a while when I was working on this deck, I had Wolfear Avengers, and they were pretty solid. But they just weren't aggressive enough. I just wanted to be able to actually have creatures that were, putting much more pressure on my opponent immediately when they came down. And I ended up switching to Hellrider.
Awesome. Okay, so here's where we see him. We see Hellrider, we see Gorklan River, we see Hellkite. I want to talk about the removal spell you used. You actually only played one spell that kills stuff. We can take a look at that. Now, you had a lot of options available to you. You could have played Pillar of Flame, you could have played Searing Spear, you could have played Flames of the Firebrand. Instead, you settled on 3 copies of Mizzium Mortars. Why does this get the nod?
I actually originally had 4 copies of Bonfire the Damned in the deck when I was originally playing it. And it was, obviously very powerful against black-white decks, things like Lingering Souls decks, and as well as green decks that have a bunch of mana creatures of their own. It was just too bad against Jund and against blue-white red. I wanted a removal spell that could punch me through things like Olivia. Olivia, if it comes down early, is a huge, huge problem. Because none of your creatures effectively fight with it. With Domri, when they can if they can play it turn 3 off of Farseek. Plus, Mizzium Mortars can just be an incredibly powerful card to sweep your opponent's board in the late game.
Right. You've still got all those mana creatures that can power up Overload if the game gets to that point.
Arbor Elf untapping Stomping Ground can give you the red mana to actually overload it. There's also the fact that, as we said earlier, my 3-drops aren't that good. They don't fight very well. Well, I don't have any 3-drops really, but my creatures don't fight very well with stuff like Loxodon Smiter. And Mizzium Mortars at 4 damage is perfect to get a Loxodon Smiter off the board.
Cool. Okay, so let's actually take a look at the mana base really quickly. Obviously you're playing your dual lands. 9 for 6 mountains. Obviously getting a mountain for Flinthoof Boar super important. I actually want to take a look at the next land because to me that's the one of the most interesting things about this list. You've actually only got 1 copy of Kessig Wolfrun. Now, clearly a deck with mana creatures, a lot of early drops would like a way to power through the top. Why are we only playing 1 of these?
I actually had 2 until very late in the process. When I actually added the Hellriders, I decided I needed to up my red mana count. For a while, I actually had Borderland Ranger in the deck, which enabled me to play an additional copy of Kessig Wolfrun, but Borderland Ranger was just too low impact. You draw Borderland Ranger late in the game, it doesn't really do anything.
Exactly.
And even if you draw Borderland Ranger to play, on turn 2 off of an elf or turn 3, it just doesn't exchange profitably with so much of what your opponent can have on the board at that point. That I decided it was worth having just generally better cards in my deck, and sacrificing the 1 extra Kessig Wolfrun by playing the extra mountain.
Sure. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at the sideboard, actually. The first card I want to look at is something you said was the reason you want to play it. You're getting all tingly. I can see it right now. Tell me about Burning Earth. Why is this card so powerful? Why would a sideboard card make you want to play a deck?
Burning Earth is Mana Barb's you. Mana Barbs is a powerful card to begin with.
And seen tons of play.
Mana Barbs has been a aggressive deck sideboard staple for however long it's been available in Standard. And Burning Earth now, When I first playing this deck, I was doing pretty well. We're playing, just pretty much just playing game ones, and was going pretty even against Blue, Red, and Jund. Then I'm like, let's try sideboarding. And I won 9 of the next 10 games, most of which involved Burning Earth.
Oh my goodness.
And it just being completely unbeatable. So many of the decks in Standard that people are playing right now have an incredibly low to no basic land count. And being able to resolve the Burning Earth against them, particularly the decks like Blue, White, Red, that are incredibly mana hungry. They want to use their mana for stuff like Sphinx's Revelation and Snapcaster for Sphinx's Revelation. And, well, that's going to hurt. So.
Cool. Okay, so we've got Burning Earth, really important sideboard card. If we can actually look at some of the rest of the sideboard,
the removal.
You got some removal. Now we saw Mizium Mortars in the main deck. Of course, that doesn't mean it's the only good removal spell in Standard. What are each one of these really quickly actually good against?
So you really want to have. I like having a diversity of removal.
Okay.
A card like, for instance, Pillar of Flame is really good against a aggressive deck. You want to be able to kill their 1-drop or their 2-drop. Whereas a card like Bonfire is very good when you're playing against a deck like Black-White Humans or Aristocrat type decks that have stuff like Lingering Souls that you want to be able to wipe the board from. Similarly, Flames of the Firebrand is kind of in between. Flames of the Firebrand is very good against those decks that have stuff like Blood Artist and Lingering Souls, where you don't necessarily want Pillar of Flame, but it's also a card that you can bring in because it's cheap enough to kill the quick creatures out of, like, say, a red deck or aggressive white deck.
Totally. Now, so for bigger creatures, we've actually got some different cards to be able to deal with those. You were excited about one of these. If we can take a look at those right now, we've got. You've got Zealous Conscripts, which we've seen before, and Gruul War Chant, which is busting out some limited technology, along with the Singleton Volcanic Strength, also kind of a card that you're used to seeing out of limited sideboards. Now, if the burn spells are for like killing smaller creature decks, black-white tokens, etc., what are you doing with these guys?
These are for killing players.
Player removal,
exactly.
and often forgot about.
One of the things, when we were testing a bunch against Jund, one of the cards that was giving me a lot of trouble was Lifebane Zombie.
Sure.
And a big part of the reason that Lifebane Zombie was giving me trouble was not just because it would come down and take a creature from my hand, but it would then be able to block my creatures and trade with them. Because most of my creatures, are like things like Flinthoof Boar or Scavenging Ooze before it gets big. They just get eaten, they just trade with a Lifebane Zombie. Between that and Thragtusk, just being able to, make a big body that's tough to get through.
Totally.
I decided that I wanted ways to just punch through the situations. And if my opponent plays a Lifebane Zombie and I play a Gruul War Chant, they're never getting value off that Lifebane Zombie. It's got to block with something else. And if my opponent plays a Thragtusk and I already have a Gruul War Chant in play and I play a Zealous Conscripts, they are dead.
Yeah. So that is so many damage.
Yeah, they just, the combination in particular of Conscripts and War Chant makes it so hard for someone to actually mount a defense with creatures.
Right.
Because Gruul War Chant is making it so, they can't block with just one guy, and then you just conscript it and kill them.
Totally. And then finally, just Volcanic Strength, is that more for just same old,
I think that the toughest matchup that I'm looking at is really Naya, and I just want to be able to have another way to sort of get past Reckoner and Smiter.
Cool. Just another way to punch through, winning mid-range fights as you are known to do. All right, thanks so much, Brian. This is Brian Kibler. I'm Zach Hill here at the Tournament Center. Let's take a look at some more Magic.
Hello everyone, welcome back. So we had 2 results outstanding in round 5. They are no longer outstanding, they're in. They are actually outstanding results. And they are this: Yuya Watanabe, the defending champion, he was at 1-2 coming into Standard. He is now 3-2. He is the only player from the bottom half of the rankings that have turned it around so far to a positive record. As a result, that means Josh Utter-Leighton has fallen to 2-3. So that was Player of the Year against reigning world champion. Just an incredible matchup. But then the really big one, goodness gracious me, Martin Yuza has played Shuhei Nakamura 11 times in competitive Magic. They're the best of friends. Yuza leads their head-to-head 8-3. Led. It is now 8-4. Shuhei Nakamura up to 2-3, and that means Martin Yuza of the Czech Republic, one of the finest players in the game today, is at 0-5 and essentially gone from the running. Brian David Marshall, what do you make of that leaderboard scoreboard? Wow.
Well, you take a look at that board, and Magic players love value, and I see absolute value. 5. Absolute value of 5. 5-0 for Reed Duke, 0-5 for Martin Yuza. One of those is pretty unexpected, and that's Martin's result. But Reed Duke, someone who was in a similar kind of position last year that you see Martin in right now, having a very, very poor tournament, has just, pushed through this entire year, really, reevaluated, and comes into this event and is now 5-0, and then, alone at the top of the standings.
Now, a couple of negatives on that scoreboard, if you like. Ben Stark, 3-0 coming out of Modern Masters Draft. He has gone 0-2 in Standard. And someone else who is really on the slide is Willy Edel of Brazil. He was at 2-0, and he has gone 2-1, 2-2, 2-3. And his body language in that last match, which you saw on camera, was just not awesome at all.
Did this slide happen after Hall of Fame results were announced? Did it, perhaps send these people into a tailspin?
I don't know how that works at all. And so that is where the standings lie right now. Let's tell you about the pairings for this round. We have Li Chan of Hong Kong at 2-3 against Dmitry Butakov at 1-4. Willy Edel, who is down at 2-3, also at 2-3, Tom Martel. Now, if either of them can win, one of them will win this last round. 3-3, that's perfectly fine.
Yep.
Absolutely perfectly fine. And
it's worth noting, I think Paulo started 0-3 last year, and then proceeded to finish in the top 4.
Okay. Text coverage will be showing us Shahar Shenhar of Israel 4-1 against Yuya Watanabe 3-2. Shahar, if you take Reed Duke out of the equation, Shahar would be our #1 story right now. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, and he still has a whole day to get himself into that #1 story position tomorrow.
Okay. Our video match, unsurprisingly, will be up at the top of the standings. And this will be Reed Duke at 5-0 against, inevitably, no one else can be 5-0, so he is up against Brian Kibler, who is at 4-1.
It's a showdown between the second and third best hair on the Pro Tour.
Who's #1? Joe Larson?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So Reed Duke against Brian Kibler is our #1 match. Sounds to me like we are ready to go down to the booth, so let's take you down for the final round. Here he comes. It's time for round 6 of the World Championship 2013.